At the time we started the organization, I was working with the Virginia Cooperative Extension Service. Roger, I think, was with Forestry Service, and Steve, of course, and Dave was, we were friends and we all knew each other, so that's what I was doing at the time.
My name is David Carter. I remember a little bit differently. I was in the clerk's office doing some research, and these two kind of long-haired guys were in the corner by themselves, and it's a small clerk's office, so when you're in there, you can pretty much hear everything that's going on. And they were looking at this property, and I wondered if they had seen, they were looking at really old deed books and stuff, trying to look at some easements and railroad rights of way and things like that. And I thought they might be interested in this old special book that showed a canal from the James River up through part of, along the Rivanna up into Palmyra, not into Palmyra, but into Rivanna County. So I started talking to them, and I was dressed a little bit differently from the way they were dressed, and my hair was a little bit different from the way they wore theirs. But after a while, we got to know each other, and they were already, I think they may have already started the organization at that point, but we all got to think about how to do some things after that. I was kind of the, what you might call the corporate attorney, which means I went out and got somebody that knew what he was doing. A man named Robert Musselman, an attorney, who gave us free service and helped us do the IRS application. And that was fantastic, because then we could get contributions and be tax deductible, for people to be tax deductible. And we had to do it in time for Old Farm Day that year. And we were really worried that we wouldn't get it. And he said, well, you can ask them to expedite it. And we go, what does that mean? Yeah, I said, IRS to expedite something? He said, yeah, ask them to expedite it. And we said, yeah, please expedite this. We need to do it for such and such a date. And we had no hope. It was like 2 months. We had no hope it was going to come back in time. It came right.
Fantastic.
So it was great. And that was kind of our big push, I think. And we got to really advertise us to the rest of the county.
I'm Roger Blank. I was actually working for the USDA Agricultural Stabilization Conservation Service at the time, and I too remember it a little differently.
25 years ago.
Steve and I had been going out on these day-long canoeing fishing trips. And I think Chet may have been involved in a couple of them. And we were noticing that the river was suffering from years of trash, and the banks were eroding badly at that time. Steve and I were taking day-long canoe trips, and I think Chet may have been on some of them, and we were realizing that the river was suffering from years of litter and erosion. And at the same time, Steve and I were involved with another gentleman in the community to try to buy a 3-mile section of the Airline Railroad, which had been abandoned by CSX, to create a rails to trail type trail. And that project failed miserably due to lack of support and unforeseen competition in the acquisition side. And a local attorney, Frank Gallo, after hearing Steve and I whining and crying about the loss of that project, told us that we had some good ideas, but we needed to be organized if we were going to have luck with that type of activity in the future. And he offered to take care of the legal work to incorporate a group if we wanted to do so. And so we decided to do that. And on the day we went to sign paperwork, he said, I just saw a guy in the clerk's office that you need to meet. He's a canoer. He's really interested in the river. And so he told us to go to the clerk's office and meet Dave. And so we came over actually looking for you. And Chet, of course, joined ranks immediately because we'd already been working collaboratively on other projects in the county. And so that's how I see it. I think I recall that it actually started from someone telling us that our efforts would probably be futile unless we organized.
Well, I'm Steve Pence. I was working for Virginia Department of Forestry at the time. I was the area forester here. One of the things that predates all of this, I think, was I was looking around and realizing I wasn't dealing with landowners that owned 500 acres. I was starting to deal with landowners that had 50 acres. And this land use ownership, the fragmentation of the ownership, was making me really upset about what was going to happen to the environment, because no longer could I practice land management on a landscape basis. It was going to be just little plots. So that's where I started getting interested in doing some sort of conservation, whether it was easements or something else. And I do recall David helping research an island in the river. That was our focus. We were trying to find out who owned it so we could lease it. And that's why we were huddled up so much in the corner trying to go through these old land books. Was the more we researched it, the more we were getting confused about who could possibly own this. The upshot of that was nobody owned it. And so that was a spin-off of the Commonwealth Timberland Trust to acquire an island that we now let Rivanna Conservation Alliance use.
We were also hearing some noise at this time from different people that there were developers and private landowners in the county who had been heard talking about removing stone, these incredible huge shaped pieces of stone that were used in canal culverts and bridges and mills for use in projects, because our interest initially was pretty seriously focused on preserving the historic resources along the river as well as the environmental resources, and so that was also part of the motivation for organizing, so that we could try to keep that from happening, or at least bring people's attention to the fact that it might happen.
Well, and we went to the Scenic River Board, thinking that would be the logical guardian of the river. And the folks at the Scenic River Board, Bunny Murray and Minnie Lee McGee, just looked at me in one of the meetings and said, "We can't do anything. You know, if it's not the river, we don't even have a voice, you know, for what's happening on the banks. The only thing that the Scenic River really does is say, you can't put a dam in the river. You can't obstruct the flow. And if anybody ever wants to get around that, they just take away the Scenic River designation." So that was part of what was going on to make us see that something more organized and more inclusive needed to happen. I mean, nobody in their right mind, at least I hope not, would ever set out to incorporate a private nonprofit to do something good for the environment. It's a lot of work.
Well, and we were all, at that time, relatively young, starting families, involved in a busy work schedule. We would literally have to pass the hat at every meeting once we incorporated. We would pass the hat every meeting to collect money to make sure we had enough money for postage and insurance. We had no membership to speak of for several years. So we were blessed to have some really good people join us pretty quickly on the board. We just had to, until we built some momentum and got some successful projects behind us, we just had to wing it.
Actually, you know, there was a lot of activity, if I remember correctly, it's 25 years ago, on the river that was, they were removing sand and for these asphalt, not asphalt, but road crews. And we got on the river a lot and used the river a lot, and we felt like it was doing a lot of damage to the fish and wildlife of the river, because, I mean, once you start digging in a big sandbar, all that sediment is running down. And so my expectations was conservation along the river and protecting, you know, the bank area and also the wildlife in the river, because I love to fish at that time. And we spent a lot of time with a lot of different people as time went on to, a lot of people from Richmond taking them down the river and getting flow levels and things of this nature to see what was ideal to maintain the river and the sediment in the river and what it caused and what it did. It was kind of an education. Being an extension, it certainly was one area that we were concentrating in from an extension standpoint of community and rural development. And one of the things was it gave me the time to work with these guys on, you know, with the conservation efforts. And, you know, as it went on, you know, as I initially saw the Rails to Trails project fail, I look back and to me that got me interested initially more than anything, because it was great to have a place where you could hike and see the river and see all the locks and canals and things of this nature, and preserve, you know, like Roger said, the historic value of it, and see it and be able to see it. And I finally, you know, I think we all realized that we wasn't going to do it headed in the direction we were headed. We would have to do something different, and that was to form an organization that would do that. I think my main thing is that we conserved the banks and waterways, and we protected the wildlife in the river.
Yeah.
One of our earliest successes was we got insurance. And trying to find insurance for a nonprofit for canoeing, we really worried. You know, we had all these canoes, we're gonna take people out, we wanted to show them the river.
We've talked about the dredging in the Rivanna, and we were opposed to that concept from so many different levels. And Rick Webb was able to write us a very scientific report that showed that we had a couple of rare and endangered, one globally rare and endangered, that were impacted by this kind of activity. We went to the Fluvanna County Board of Supervisors. They passed a resolution saying that there would be no dredging in the Rivanna. First time out of the box, we asked for something, we got it because of science. And there, I think, you may get very tired of some of us always saying we need to be a science-based organization. But that's where the good wins come from. And that was that first rally and that first scientifically based win put us on a course. I had no idea what I wanted from our Rivanna Conservation Society. I knew we had written down some really pretty words that pretty much covered everything. So I mean, personally, I've enjoyed watching the thing evolve to become something that I could never in my life have imagined this becoming what it is. So I didn't come in with a lot of preconceived notions of what success would be, but that's just my personality. I tend to go into something and try to get through it alive, not hurt, and maybe have made something better. And I think we've done that. So that was my hopes and early goals.